Welcome to the Perfectly Flawed podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. For those that don't know you, would you like to give a little bit of an overview of who you are?
Yeah, thanks, Renee, for having me on your podcast, first and foremost. My name's Bill Schuffenhauer. I am a retired three-time Olympian and Olympic silver medalist in the sport of bobsleigh for Team USA. Now, in my retirement of sports, I do a lot of stuff in the nonprofit sector. I'm philanthropic. I'm a managing partner of two global technology companies. I'm also a partner in a company called Operation Limitless, where myself and three other guys put on these very experiential, educational, team building events for corporate groups all around the world. Father, I'm recently engaged, and just honestly, just living my best life right now in retirement from sports.
Well, that's so exciting. There's so many things that we need to delve into more. I guess the first one to start with is how did you get into bobsleigh? Because for me, from my point of view here in Australia, it's not a very popular sport. So, what drew you to that and how did you get into it?
So yeah, pretty interesting story, which a lot of that story has been known worldwide. So I grew up very in the underserved community. So drug addicted mom, foster homes, lived on the streets as a child. But at a young age, I found a passion for sports and got involved with athletics at first. So I ran track and field in the discipline of the decathlon for Team USA for several years, all the way up until, funny enough, when I was getting ready for the 2000 Sydney Olympics. I was top five ranked in the world and top two Americans. Was favored to go to Sydney and had the expectation of winning an Olympic medal of some sort. But prior to the Olympic trials, I was just doing a kind of a tune-up meet, just making sure the muscles and the mindset was all good to go. And fortunately, or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, ended up blowing out my ankle in the long jump, which is the second event of the decathlon. And that pretty much kind of put the nail in the coffin for my career in track and field. Fortunately, I had someone that knew somebody else, kind of that 6 degrees of separation. That this guy, they're like, hey, you should try doing the bobsled. Like guys like you that are big, fast, strong, and powerful are a great fit for it. And they're going on and on and on and telling me all this stuff. And I was like, well, hold on a minute. What exactly is bobsled? I had absolutely no clue what the sport of bobsled was. And then, of course, funny enough, the way that I was introduced to the sport was the international movie that a lot of people know with the Jamaican bobsled team called Cool Runnings. So I watched this show and I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. It's fast and looks exciting. And so it piqued my interest. But when I had an opportunity to see, a competition over in St. Moritz, Switzerland, with all the countries competing, that's when I got a glimpse of like the true athleticism it took to be a high level bobsled athlete. And mind you, I only had a year and 3 months before the Olympics in Salt Lake City to switch over to a brand new sport. And the odds of doing that are tremendous. Like nobody just switches over to a new sport a year and 3 months before the Olympics and makes it. But we kind of gathered together with my coaches and my team, and we're like, well, how cool would that be though if we could write this story of going from this homeless kid in Salt Lake City that literally eventually changed his stars in his life to then make the Olympic team in Salt Lake City. And we are like, man, that would be a really, really cool story. And I just looked at my coaches and I was like, well, what do we have to lose? Why not me? Let's just go for it and keep the same mindset that we had for track and just put it over here in the sport of bobsled and just go for it and see what happens. And of course, with a lot of preparation and getting to understand what bobsled was and learn about it and be a student of the game, if you will. A year and 3 months later, I'm on the Olympic team and win the first Olympic medal for Team USA in over 46 years. And then I did two more Olympics, but
That is an incredible story. As you said, like what kind of story would it be? And then actually achieving it is another a level again. What was it like once you understood what was required of you to be a bobsled athlete? What was it about it that made you keep going and that made you like drove you in that motivation to continue in this sport?
As a young kid, when I was dealing with the issues of being, a kid in the system and drug addicted parents and all that stuff, um, you know, I was told by my coaches, when I started getting involved with athletics that, if you ever make, the Olympic team, your name will forever be set in history and opportunities will open up to you. And of course, it was really difficult, making the pivot from athletics to bobsled, but it was something that I had to do because it was a goal, it was a dream, and it was a bucket list to represent my country. And it didn't matter if it was bobsled, track and field, table tennis. I didn't even care. I just wanted to have an opportunity to go, hey, this kid started off with absolutely no expectations because he's this ghetto kid, right? Grew up in the system, and I wanted to help people understand that it doesn't matter like where you come from, doesn't matter what you've done. If we put our minds to it and we put our physical attributes to it and are able to learn, listen, be educated from coaches, we can achieve and accomplish anything we want. And when I obviously like when I first got involved with bobsled, I knew I had the physical and mental capabilities to do what these guys and these gals were doing. It was more about learning the actual sport itself and the technique and, how do you push this big giant object with three other guys as fast as you can and jump in and go for this intense ride. And, it was actually even more interesting for me because as a decathlete, it's all about me. It's me out there running all the events and me and so it's one of my first opportunities outside of like American football that I had an opportunity to work with three other guys and coaches to figure out how you put together the very best run you can and achieve greatness, if you will. And my first competition I ever went and pushed a bobsled was a World Cup team trials race, and I didn't know it, but I didn't care. I was just like, oh my gosh, I finally get to go down a bobsleigh and like, have fun, and this is going to be the real test, right? Yes, I feel like I can push it. Yes, I can keep up athletically. Yes, I can keep up mentally. But what is the experience for me going to be like once I go down this bobsled at 90 miles per hour and 6 G forces of pressure? And we go down and we do all of our runs. Lo and behold, the team that I was with ended up doing way better than they've ever done before in history. And we get done and the guys were like, oh my gosh, that was so amazing. And I was like, that was cool. That was like the funnest ride. It just reminded me of like a really intense roller coaster. And I just knew right away once I got done with those 3 runs, I was like, I have to do this. And I continued on that year to do like America's Cup in North America. Had great results, was winning gold and silver left and right, and then went over to Europe to do the European Cup, and that's where like I had an opportunity to compete with like the big boys on a world stage. And the more I got involved with the sport, the more I learned about the sport, the more I realized that this is something I could do. And we were just going to continue with it and see what could happen.
Yeah, which is pretty incredible. Do you think because of your upbringing that there was no expectation for you to sort of achieve anything? Do you think that in a sense made it easier because there was no external pressures that you could sort of just do it and people were sort of just surprised of whatever it was that you achieved?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of looking at like negative situations in life and trying to figure out how do we turn that and make it into the most positive situation you can. And again, for me, you know, there wasn't really a whole lot of pressure because nobody knew who I was in the sport of bobsleigh. In fact, the only pressure that came was from some of the other athletes because they're like, who are you? Like, who do you expect to like show up out of nowhere and make the Olympic team when we've been here for years? And I literally ended up having a conversation with one guy, and I said, "Hey, listen, I respect what you are, what you do." I said, "But my goal and my dream is also to be an Olympian, and I've done everything that I needed to be to. I did everything I needed to do to be here right now on this stage." And I said, "I hope you have too, because I'm going to make this Olympic team." And lo and behold, I made the Olympic team, and he didn't. But hey.
It's pretty cool. What was that feeling like after, a really hard sort of 12 months and then winning that first medal? Take me back to that moment. What was it like?
Oh, the Olympic medal or my first bobsled medal?
Oh, we'll do first Olympic medal first, and we'll go back to, and then
Okay.
we can do the bobsled medal.
Yeah, so my first Olympic medal, obviously in 2002, literally we could not have written a better script than how it went down. It was in my own hometown. Every social media, every sports media, ESPN, everyone found out about my life story. So when it came to competing at the Olympics, like I had, my family was there, my friends there were, people I went to school with were able to come and watch me in opening ceremonies and the competition and closing ceremonies. But when we crossed the finish line, because I was so new to the sport, I honestly didn't know exactly what place we were in yet. Funny enough, I just knew that we had done really well. And then one of my teammates like yelled at me and he's like, "We just won an Olympic silver medal." And it was just like you try to create like this most amazing vision for your own life and goals and dreams and things that you want to accomplish. And you hear that phrase and people say, "You know what? Aim for the stars, and if you land on the moon, that's great." But I aimed for the stars and I landed on that star. And it was just such an emotional, happy moment to not only do that, but to reflect on the path before and realize how many people that told me I couldn't do it, that whatever excuses they came up with, and just a moment of pride, if you will, for myself too, because I didn't let anyone deter me from the overall focus. And when we actually went out on the stage to receive our medals, the one moment that stands out to me the most, outside of again seeing all my friends and family out in the crowd cheering and holding up signs, saying, "Hey, Bill, I told you dreams come true." But my grandma throughout my careers played a pretty significant role in my life. When I was going to get sent to another shelter or be homeless again, some of those times she would take me in and she was holding up a sign that said, "Son, I told you that those dreams could come true." At the same time, my mom was in jail, and we did an interview with her prior to the Olympic Games in jail. She was able to watch the Olympics and watch me compete from jail. There was just so many things that happened, and it was almost like divine intervention. Um, you know, Capped with competing and training hard and being ready for the moment. But it was just an absolute amazing experience. And when I go back to that moment right now, I still have an opportunity to live that because it never gets tiring. It never gets boring to be like, "Oh my gosh, my family name will forever be in the history books as an Olympic silver medalist with Team USA." And that was always what I wanted to do. I wanted to, again, not only let people know, here in Utah, in the US, but worldwide, that we can accomplish anything if we put our minds to it, right? And that's, one of the things I feel like I really was able to accomplish and be that person that other people can look at and say, "Man, if he could do it, then I could do it." And again, to this day, 20 plus years later, I don't get tired of looking at my Olympic medal, and I've got Olympic rings tattooed on my arm and stuff. And it's great to have people come up to you and say, "Oh my gosh, I watched you in the Olympics, and you were such an inspiration for me." And it just puts me in a place of of being humble and really appreciating everything it took to get there, and being able to share that with people all around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to ask you, you've achieved like the ultimate goal. Like, you've come from a really disadvantaged background and then you've worked your ass off and achieved an Olympic medal. Where do you go from there? Do you feel like, okay, I've achieved everything that I want? How do you then, step up again? How do you keep going? Like what's the goal after that?
So when I was running athletics at university, one of my college coaches would always tell me, any fool can do it once. And he'd always say this to me during practice. And finally, one day, because he would just kind of say, like, I would do a high jump and I would do really good, or something. And he always say, any fool could do it once. And after a while, I finally was like, okay, what exactly do you mean by any fool could do it once? And he's like, well, if you're a master in what you do, what you're striving to be, then if you high jump once and do really well, then you should be able to repeat that and do it over and over again, and master your skill set of whatever it is. And so after the 2002 Olympics, again, coming off the first Olympic medal for the US in over 46 years, you're on such a high that I was like, I've got to do this again. And, fortunately, I went on to win several national championships, world championships, competed in two more Olympics, and was able to, create goals and milestones for myself, to say, do we want to stay at one-time Olympian and Olympic silver medalist, which, yeah, I could have quit right then and there and been absolutely fine. But I wanted to make sure that I like hit a home run for people all around the world. Again, taking that philosophy that any fool could do it once. So I decided to obviously do it two more times, and then retire from there.
Yeah, which is pretty incredible. How important do you think mindset is in sport and then particularly for you in being a bobsled athlete?
I think mindset is absolutely super, super important. It's important even with what I do now, and I'm sure we'll talk about it now. But I mentor and I coach executives all around the world. I run my own technology companies. My Operation Limitless team building company. Mindset is the one thing that we talk about, right? Because that's literally the one thing that we can either create a winning attitude, or we can literally defeat ourselves with. And so many people always focus on the physical aspects of athletes, right? And that was like one of the questions that I had after the Olympics. Is they're like, when you were standing up there in 2002 during the Olympics, and thousands and thousands of people are watching you, and billions of people watching you around the world, like, they were like, weren't you so afraid and nervous? And my response to them was, you know what, as I was walking out, getting ready to do that first run, I took a moment to reflect again on the path that got me to where I am, and going over like all the trainings and the, nutrition, and being, the first one to practice and the last one to leave, and all the discipline and all the mental training. Because mindset wise, I put myself in that position thousands of times, because I wanted to make sure when I stepped up on that podium to compete in the biggest race of my life, that I just wanted to know that I was ready to rock and roll and go out and execute at the highest level. So again, the more we mentally prepare ourselves for situations, no matter what it is, the better we're going to set ourselves up for success. Um, I have this saying that I also learned from one of my coaches, that we plan our race, we race our plan, but we be prepared for the unknowns in life, because the unknowns are the things that will derail us. And some of that unknown is, if you don't mentally prepare yourself for hard times, those hard times are going to defeat you every single time. So again, the mental preparation and the mental focus and mental mindset is absolutely a necessity for anyone to win in any aspect of their life.
Yeah. And what sort of advice or tips would you give around being mentally prepared for if you're, ahead of a company or in sport, what advice could you give that sort of covers as many people as possible around
Yeah.
mental training, I guess?
Yeah. So I do the same thing with my business as I did back in sport. I mentally prepare for situations because, with sport, there's not a whole lot of room for um, mistakes, for you to make and then still be able to have an opportunity to win. Is it possible? Yes. But when it comes to like running a company and you've got employees and you got partners and all these things different going on, there's so much more going on, and you're working with so many different like personalities and demographics of people. But what keeps me consistent is just kind of sticking to my guns of who I am as a person. Yeah, I might be someone who leads and is a managing partner in all these big companies, but I also really enjoy helping other people out and giving them an opportunity to be leaders themselves. And the appreciation of having more minds um, working together in collaboration is absolutely huge. So I'm a big fan. Like I tell a lot of my clients when we run into issues with whatever they're doing, drop your ego, get rid of the ego. I mean, there's so many executives, both men and women, and not only just executives, just people in general, right? They live their life off their ego, and it doesn't serve them, and it doesn't serve anyone else. And so, the more vulnerable you can be, and again, the more you're willing to learn from other people, the more you're going to prepare yourself to be the very best version of you, and help go out and win whatever you want to do, but also help people around you. Winning by yourself is no fun. And so the more you can surround yourself with just awesome people, the funner that experience is going to be, and the better the story is going to be as well. So,
Yeah, absolutely. On a different note, as I said, a lot of my background of bobsled is Cool Runnings, just like when you first came to the sport. I think it's a very popular movie. Everyone loves that movie. How dangerous is the sport in reality?
yeah. So, when you ask me just, from a person watching the sport of bobsleigh, like I'm like, oh, it doesn't look dangerous at all. But I've been in several bobsleds, doing 90 plus miles per hour, and the reality is the sport is significantly more dangerous than it really looks like on TV, because in bobsled you have like these lines that the drivers try to follow, and there's if your line is from here to here and you're off like a quarter of an inch, that could mean absolute disaster. They've had bobsleds fly out of the track. They've had people die in bobsled. Um, so you think about it, going down this contraption that's 14 feet long, fiberglass and steel at 90 plus miles per hour. That's not a good recipe if anything goes wrong. That's an absolute disaster. And I've been a part of some of like the worst bobsled crashes in history. And there's no seat belts, there's no safety guards, So if you crash, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. Going 90 miles per hour with your shoulder on ice, not good.
No, I can't imagine it would be at all.
Yeah.
Do you have an embarrassing story that you would have come across from when you were doing bobsled?
Um, I've never really had any embarrassing moments while competing. I've been on a team where there was some embarrassing moments, where I've had a teammate who went to load in the four-man bobsled and slipped and tripped and fell like sideways. So we're going this way, and he's laying sideways, and I literally had to grab him by the back, pick him up with one hand, and put him into the bobsled. So that was always kind of interesting. I'm just glad I'm not the one who slipped and fell. And we had this one situation when I first started doing bobsled. We were in Königssee, Germany, and for whatever reason at the time, me and this Canadian kid just didn't get along, which is weird because I get along with everyone. But we're just like talking smack back and forth. and his sled was going before mine. And he's like, talking smack that he thought he was faster than me and he was a better athlete. And we're going on. And so he goes and they start with his driver and they're going. And all of a sudden, you're watching the sled, his arms going out like this and out like this. And he's still trying to run. And next thing you know, he literally tries to jump into the sled, but he waited too long. And he Supermans. And as he's like going to jump in the sled and Superman, the sled goes away from him and he falls flat on his face on the bobsled track. And the bobsled went down with him. So I was laughing, not out loud, but I was literally dying of like hilarious laughter inside. I didn't throw it in his face because we didn't need to. He was already embarrassed enough. But I would say that's probably one of the worst embarrassing moments for somebody else.
Definitely. When you've achieved everything that you have, and as you said, after the first time winning an Olympic medal, and then to go back, as you said, any fool can do it once, so you went back and you've done it 3 times. When you've gotten to that point, what was it for you that was like, I think it's time to sort of retire now? How do you make that decision?
Yeah, it's a very, very difficult decision to make. Um, I actually competed in the 2002 Olympics, competed in the 2006 Torino Italy Olympics, retired at that point, went to work for a financial institution for 2 years, and like just kept having these like, and this feeling like you're not done yet. You haven't given it all you wanted to. And so I came out of retirement in 2000, end of 2008, to attempt to make the 2010 Olympics. And of course, I mean, it was a long, hard battle. Probably one of the greatest moments of my life to actually make that Olympic team in 2010 because I was older. I was competing against 20-something-year-old like young, strong bucks. And I was the old guy on the team, and all even the athletes were like, "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be retired." But fortunately, just focused on it and made that team. And I knew that 100% for sure after the 2010 Olympics, I was going to retire. A lot of things factored into that. And part of it was that traveling 8 to 9 months out of the year, being gone from your family, was not very healthy for my family. And so, that just made it hard. My relationship with my kids, it was a struggle because I was great. My kids got to see me on TV and watch me compete, but I was never home. And so I knew that when the 2010 Olympics were done, that I was going to be done. And it's hard, but I knew that I definitely retired at the right time. Mentally, yes, I could have. Mentally, right now, I think I could go and do another Olympics, but the physical part of me is like, bro, wake up. There's no way you can do another Olympic. You can barely get up out of the couch. But I feel like I was able to leave the sport on my own when I wanted to, at the level that I wanted to. Did I have bigger and bigger goals that I wanted to accomplish? Yeah, I did. But I can still walk away knowing that, I changed my family history. Again, that'll never change because that goes into history books forever. It was a great career. I wanted to be a role model to my kids, to give them someone to look up to, and I was able to do that. And be the kid that came from nothing and accomplished everything. So
Yeah. And if younger Bill could see you now and everything, all your achievements along the way, how do you think he would react?
I think about that all the time because I do a mental training a lot where I go back to my youth as a troubled kid, and I have a lot of conversations with this young kid, and it's I think the younger Bill would look up to this Bill and be like, so I was right. We were able to do all the things that I'm thinking of in my head, even though so many people are telling us that we can't accomplish it. And my response is like, yeah, I look at this little kid when I'm doing my meditation. I'm like, you're going to be okay. Everything's going to work out exactly the way it needs to for you.
Yeah, that's awesome. How do you like what's your relationship with success versus failure and do you treat them in the same way?
I love failure, love it. And I actually love that question because, I think so many people just, regular people, not to downgrade anyone, but people who are not like crazy intense, like trying to go for the stars on a daily basis. But they always, a lot of people always look at failure as failure. But the reality is that is part of the recipe for success. If you don't have failures along the way, how do you know to make any changes to improve? If I stepped up right now and said, "Hey, I'm going to go to the Olympics again tomorrow," and it was just a streamlined process, no issues, everything went perfectly well, where's the learning lessons, right? And that's how I look at it. So I really appreciate what failure brings to the table, not only in sports, but relationships, business, life. The more important part about appreciation of failure is what are you learning from those failures, right? That's part of the whole point of failing at anything is like, okay, what did I learn from that? And not only that, how can I actually improve so I can take that next step forward or that next step up, whatever it may be, and continue on that path of success for me to achieve whatever it is that I want.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say then was one of the biggest challenges that you had to overcome during your sporting career?
Oh goodness. There were a lot. Um, I think realistically, just like anyone else, the biggest hurdle you have in life is yourself. And, we will be the first ones to put the thought of doubt in our mind. Or you may look at another athlete or another team or another business and see that they're just kicking ass and taking names. And then sometimes you're like, oh man, I don't know if I can do that, right? So we put that bit of doubt in our mind, but that's such a perfect opportunity. And thankfully, I had great coaches to be with me along the way to help me keep my mind right, keep my focus. But I utilize again, I utilize failure and negative situations to the very best of my ability. But again, part of my biggest issues back in the day is that I typically compete at the level of competition I'm at. So that means like I might go to a lower level competition where realistically I should absolutely dominate. And this happened both in athletics and football and bobsled. And I would just compete at a level good enough to win or be in the top three. Um, that's one thing that bothered me throughout my whole career. I never really had an answer for it. I didn't worry about it too much because I knew when it came to the big show, world championships, nationals, Olympics, that I would still compete at that level. Where a lot of other people, sometimes that's something that defeats them, like being on the big stage. I love that. I love to perform. But yeah, we can be our very worst own enemies and ruin everything for ourselves, right? So yeah, that was one thing I had to overcome throughout the years is just not getting into my own mind and defeating myself.
Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to. On the flip side of that, what would you say has been one of the highlights of your career?
Oh gosh, of my athletic career or my whole entire career, I have lots of highlights. um, you know, I think a lot of people would like think that my response is going to be winning an Olympic medal, making to be Olympian. Which, yeah, don't get me wrong, those were great highlights of my career. But right after the 2002 Olympics, um, John Saraceno, he's a reporter for ESPN, came up to me and he's like, man, that was so amazing. Like, who do you want to be the most proud of you? Your mom, your grandma, blah, blah, blah. And I said, you know what, John, the reality is I am more proud of myself than anyone else. And the reason I say that is because I still had to make the decision to pursue that dream. I had to make the decision to get up and train every day. I had to make the decision to, you know, do stuff that no one else is willing to do at a high level. So for me, reflecting back on just seeing that I did everything the way it should have been done in the right way, and respected everyone that I was around as far as athletes, coaches, and people and family members. So again, for me, it's just the appreciation of myself that I actually did it and I never gave up.
I love that answer so much. I think that is like top tier answer right there. I
Thank
love to
you.
do 3 questions to finish with. And the first one is, what is something that you're most proud of about yourself? So similar sort of wavelength there, but a little bit different.
And funny enough, if you would have asked me that question several years ago, it would have been an absolutely completely different answer. But one of the things that I am definitely most proud of, when I graduated high school, like everyone at my high school knew I was the athlete. We were signing, our yearbooks and all that silly stuff that we used to do. And I had one of my friends come up to me and say, you're going to make it. I can't believe it's going to be someday. There's going to be a movie about you. You're going to do the Olympics and all this stuff. And he's like, don't forget me when you make it big. And I said, you know what? I definitely won't, but I want you to not forget me if I don't. And
Mm.
why I'm so proud of that is because if we could go back umpteen years, which is a long time ago in high school for me, I'm literally, and all my friends from high school still say the same thing. I am still the same dynamic, goofy, energetic guy that I was back in high school. And I never let my success as an athlete or someone in business ever change me whatsoever. So I feel like I've really stayed true to who I was from the very get-go. And that's allowed me to be, again, really authentic with everyone I come across. Because again, like, it's great to achieve great things and have great things, but when you allow those things to change who you are, the foundation of your soul, I think that's where things start to go south. And for me, I've just always been the guy that's just like, it doesn't matter what I do, what I accomplish, I'm still the guy that I am and will always be that, right? And in the coaching world, we have the saying that the be do have. Be a great person. You'll be able to have the things in your life that you want, which will give you an opportunity to do whatever it is that you want in life. And so I've just always really focused on who am I as a being, and everything else falls in place.
Yeah. And it's not an easy thing to do. So absolutely something you should be proud of. The next question I have for you is, what is your favorite quote and or the best piece of advice that you've been given?
I have a lot of my own quotes, but the one that I use the most, funny enough, because I remember years and years back seeing all these like super influential coaches and business guys that had their own quotes, and I was like, oh man, someday I should create my own quote. And I was like, you're not that smart enough to create your own quote. Now I have several, but the one that I live by, and this stemmed from a speaking event that I was doing, for the MBA program at a university, and I was doing a presentation on how do you become a leader and how does a leaders leave legacies behind. And when I was doing research for that talk, I came across some really interesting statistics that, in a world of nearly 8 billion people that we have, only 2% of that population ever accomplishes their dreams. And the other 98% don't do it because they fail to take actions, or they think that they're going to be embarrassed by someone else on what they think their ideas are. And so from that, I created a quote that goes like this: dreams are only dreams until we take the actions to ignite them. So what actions are you willing to take today to change your tomorrow.
I love that. That's really good.
Thank you.
I
I
love it
like
a
it.
lot. Do you have any other tips or advice for those that are listening?
You know what? Yeah, as far as like whatever it is that you're doing in life, the foundational principles of success are literally the same. It doesn't matter if it's in sports, relationships, business, school. But one of the coolest things as human beings is that we don't have to do life on our own. And that is one thing that has literally served me so well throughout my career in sports and business is that, again, I don't have an ego to where like, oh, I can just do it on my own. I've just never been that way because the results of me reaching out and connecting with other people with all these other different ideas and philosophies and we should do it this way, you should do it that way has been monumental for me. And that it's like you go to a Home Depot. I don't know if you have Home Depots in Australia, but like a place where you go to get stuff to fix your home and the
Yeah.
garden and all that stuff, right? When you go into these stores, you have like an overwhelming amount of tools and resources for you to help complete your job at the very best you can. And not only that, you have professionals in that store that are willing to give you advice on how to do it. Same thing in life, take advantage in a healthy way of all the people that are around you that are willing to help and support and give to you. Now, you don't always have to use whatever information they give you, but you might as well try it and see if it works for you. And then you just build your toolbox of success tools and stories and ideas and processes for you to like, because you never know when that tool or thought or that idea will come into play in your life. And I'm a it's literally a perfect living example. And we didn't talk about this much, but after I retired from the 2010 Olympics, I lost my identity. I fell into this massive depression, alcoholism, addiction for like 8.5 years. And it was because I tried to reinvent the wheel and I tried to do it all on my own. And thankfully, like I came out of that and I just went back to the rules that I had as an athlete and surrounded myself with amazing people, reached out to people, said, hey, how do I do this? I need help. Big 6 foot, 240-pound guy being vulnerable and saying, I need help. But it has been so monumental in my career that, again, I've got super success as an athlete, 3 Olympics, Olympic silver medal. And I'm now like one of the top global executive coaches. And I work with, again, athletes and executives all around the world. I've got 3 companies that will do well over 6-7 figures, maybe 8 figures in this next year. And it's all because of me being vulnerable enough to like learn from other people and be willing to be open to ideas, right? So, yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much, Bill, for giving your time today and sharing everything that you have about your career and advice and everything in between. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm so glad we finally connected as well.
Yeah.